We are here, this is meeting 45, we're in public, televised, all looking good, and we're here on a 1064 order from members of the committee. Okay, point of order.
Thank you. There we go. I just wanted to, you're at the point where you're advising us why we've come together, and that's why I've done my point of order at this stage. I'd like a little clarification, if I could, Chair, starting with what happened to Thursday's meeting.
What happened to last Thursday's meeting?
Yeah, I thought like we were scheduled to meet, we had a plan, and then all of a sudden it was canceled.
Well, I assumed we had a plan when we left here the Tuesday before. I had commitment from all sides that we would move forward, and we'd move an extension on Mr. Trost's motion, and I had commitment on concurrence on that. And when that turned out to be a mistruth, I decided, well, then I'm not sure where we're headed on the plan, so let's just wait and see what we have going on.
Well, all right, let's just set that aside for the moment. That would then have us, because I may return to that, so I reserve the right to return. However, that would have had us meeting today and Thursday as our regular meetings. I mean, there was nothing special about this. This is our usual time. The House is sitting. It's in order. There's some people who had it in their mind that they were going to be out of here early, and that's up to them in their mind. But the fact is that as long as the House is sitting, we meet. And so I'm a little unclear as to why we wouldn't be proceeding with the agenda today that we had set last week, such as dealing with witnesses from the PMB. We were going to have 2 witnesses, and we were going to do the Bazan report. We wanted to clean that up before we rose for the summer. And yet, all of a sudden, a letter signed by 5 members of the committee has you suggesting we're here because of this, and yet it seems to me that this is a regular meeting in its regular place, and we already had an agenda that we set up at a previous regular meeting. And so I don't understand how we went from what we planned to be done at a regularly scheduled meeting is all set aside, and suddenly the business of 5 members is now the order of the day. And I raise that for this reason, Chair. If this stands as it is right now, then what it says is that any time 5 members or more don't like the agenda of a meeting that's coming up, all they have to do is sign this, make what is a regular meeting a special meeting, and then the agenda of the special meeting supersedes the agenda of the regularly scheduled meeting, which I don't think is your intention, because that just creates all kinds of chaos and havoc. So maybe at this point, Chair, you could just help me understand how it is we're where we are today and why we're not doing the regularly scheduled business of the committee.
When a chair of a committee receives a letter signed by 3 or more members of the committee asking for a meeting on an individual topic, under Standing Order 1064, that meeting takes place within a certain period of time. It must be called within 48 hours and take place within 5. Today fit that mold and said, let's use that time. We had done some planning at our last meeting. I'll give you that. However,
what?
Well, it fell apart. I mean, some of the things you asked your chair to go do, like move concurrence in the House, I heard your very, obviously honest House leader say yes in here and no in the House. I assumed that you just meant that the plans we'd made then had gone out the window. We had done some research on the witnesses. However, they weren't both available for our meeting.
Really?
Right.
I thought, was there any witnesses canceled? Were there notices sent out to any witnesses where they were said, sorry, you were invited, now you're uninvited? Did that happen?
We had one witness who was available, but holding a meeting with one witness out of 2 on a topic that needs to be done in one meeting just didn't, let's make it so we can do it together. Mr. Christopherson, I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to sit here and argue scheduling with you.
Well, yes, you are, Chair, because you don't have the unilateral right to decide what this committee does. There is some semblance of democracy here.
Agreed, but our standing orders make it very clear what a chair must do when he receives a notice.
I understand, Chair, but if there was already a regularly scheduled meeting at the time you said there'll be a special meeting. How can you have 2 meetings at the same time, a regularly scheduled meeting and a special meeting? A special meeting is a special meeting, and there's nothing special about today. In fact, it's a regular meeting, and we had an agenda set, and in addition to what you've commented on, we were also going to do the Bazan report, and dealing with the report on leaks. So there was important business to be here, and it just looks, Chair, like there's more shenanigans going on, and unfortunately, it seems to have involved your office, and I'm really at a loss as to how we're here on a special meeting that's a regularly scheduled meeting and why we're not doing the regularly scheduled business that we had set out.
I've given you the reason for it. You continue to repeat why you don't like me, but that's fine with me, Mr. Christopherson.
Oh, I quite like you. It's your ruling I don't like at all.
The ruling, as a chair, is that when a 1064 motion comes, I have certain rules I must follow. I followed.
A special meeting replaces a regular meeting, Chair. Is that how that works?
All our meetings are special, Mr. Christopherson.
Don't do that, Chair. Don't trivialize this. This is important stuff.
Knowing that it was a regular scheduled time, it made it where we were sure all of our members would be able to attend.
And we had an agenda set for that day, which is today, that we set previously at a regular meeting. And I want to know why it is that gets trumped by this letter. It ought not.
Well, I'm telling you it does.
Wait a minute, I want to be clear about this. So you're telling me that a letter that comes in signed by 3 or more members of the committee to ask for a special meeting on a particular subject. Fair enough, and I'm a chair too, so I deal with these things.
Right.
So then you deemed that because you knew conveniently we were all going to be here for a regular meeting, that it made sense that, well, since they're going to be here for a regular meeting, why don't we have them here for a special meeting? And that's just not how it works.
We just use our time.
That's not how this works. If you want to call a special meeting, it would be a special meeting. A special meeting is not during the time of the regular meeting when we already have an agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry you think that way, but the chair... Yeah, it says right here in the standing, in O'Brien and Boss, that the chair may agree to consider the request at a regular meeting of the committee.
Let's consider the request. That doesn't mean it bumps out all the business that we had already set. So you add it to the agenda as something we may talk about.
Mr. Christopherson, on this point of order, I'm going to move on. I've told you what my ruling is, that a 1064 notice came to me. I scheduled it during our regular meeting.
And you blew off the agenda that we'd all agree on. How does that happen? How does an agenda we all agree on get unilaterally changed by the chair?
On this point of order, I have Mr. Julian first and then Mr. Richard, but let's move on, folks. We can argue about why we're meeting, but let's get meeting. Mr. Julian?
Well,
You're not just gonna
I'd like to take Mr. Christopherson's comments. I think are very important. As you know, Mr. Chair, you move concurrence and you got it in the House. So that's a red herring. The reality is...
You looked me in the eye and said no, Mr. Julian, after you said yes at this table.
I said no to
There's a
that
matter of
day,
trust.
and you presented it the next day, and you had said that you were going to present it on Thursday. So if you want to go a day ahead, that's fine. You should flag it with the opposition when you do that. That's I think, just appropriate counsel. If you're going to do it a day that is different than the day that's agreed to, that's your choice. But we ended up having concurrence the day that we agreed to.
Okay, let's get back to this meeting.
Getting back to this meeting, Mr. Chair, this committee is the furthest behind of any committee on Parliament Hill. We discussed a couple of weeks ago all of the outstanding issues, including what has been raised by the Deputy Law Clerk as pretty egregious leaks from the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. There was agreement to have discussions on that. There was agreement to have witnesses. We're pressing deadlines that come up in just a few days. We have 2 committee meetings prior to the next expiry of a private member's bill. So there's some real problems with this committee's functioning. Now, I'm not a member of the committee. I come in and happy to be here. But the reality is the committee is far, far, far behind. And we're seeing committee meetings being canceled unilaterally. We're seeing committee meetings being replaced. It is not appropriate process. And I have to agree with Mr. Christopherson. The idea that we can have 3 members sign and replace any regular meeting of the committee, I think is inappropriate. There are other venues of doing that. But the greater concern is the fact that this committee is so far behind. It keeps asking for extensions, but no work gets done because I think your government members seem to be more intent on kangaroo courts and a witch hunt than actually working on what Procedure and House Affairs should be working on.
Mr. Richards and then Mr. Lukiski, and we'll get onto this meeting, please.
Certainly. Thanks, Mr. Chair. My understanding is you've made a ruling on this point of order. So I'm curious as to how come there continues to be a debate on a point of order that you've ruled, Mr. Chair.
I'm trying to make it special for Mr. Christopherson. Okay. Mr. Lukiski?
Thank you. And no, just to underscore quickly what Blake said, I mean, obviously the NDP doesn't want to be here to discuss this issue because of this potential damaging effect it has on them, having to repay $1.17 million. We want to find out exactly how we can best make that happen. And that's why we're supposed to be here. That's why we requested this special meeting that can be scheduled during a regular meeting. If the NDP wants to continue to try and obfuscate and evade their responsibility in repayment, that's up to them. But we want to have a meeting on it, and you've made a ruling. If the NDP wants to challenge the ruling, let them go ahead, and let's get on with the meeting.
There you go. Shut it down.
I agree with what's been said, that we certainly still have some items on our agenda. I will give that this, I will take a bit of offense to Mr. Julian's statements about this committee being far behind. We accomplished 2 or 3 very big things during this session of Parliament, and I thank you all for your hard work. Those of you that are regular members of the committee, perhaps Mr. Julian should look in more often. And I feel very, very comfortable what we've been able to accomplish. So let's move forward on the reason we're here today, which is 1064.
I'm going to challenge the chair.
On what?
On your
we're having a meeting at our regular time, or
no? At your ruling that this is a special meeting. How can a special meeting be at the same time as a regular meeting? Well, I know the government. You've got your political agenda.
Not across the table, please. Through me, if you want to challenge me, I'm perfectly fine.
Yes, I would like to.
So pardon?
Actually say I'm challenging it because I have no idea what the challenge is other than to...
I guess it's whether we're special or not. Look, I'm suggesting we're having a meeting due to a receipt of a standing order 1064 letter from enough members of the committee in order to have it, and we're having it in our regular scheduled time.
And so and that's what I'm raising that as strictly a procedural point of order. I don't believe that you can declare a special meeting to automatically replace a regular scheduled meeting just because 3 members sign a paper.
Well, I read the passage from O'Brien and Bosk. I understand that you dislike it, Mr. Christopherson, but procedurally it's correct.
But what you're doing, but my point, Chair, is that what you're doing is changing the agenda.
My understanding that a motion to challenge the chair cannot be debated. So why are we debating this?
Because you're chair was a bit mad at him.
Okay.
Let's go. We're going to
And it's all
challenge. Let's have a
personal,
vote on
isn't
it. All those in favor of sustaining the chair's ruling? I see 5. Those against? I see 3. We're going with what the chair said. It's special. All right.
Meeting are just, the items on the regular scheduled meeting are moot, don't exist, appear
Well,
miraculously at some point. What happens to that?
We'll certainly deal with this first, Mr. Christopherson. That's now we've suggested this is our order of business, so we'll deal with this.
Right, which is the real point, was the idea to use these parliamentary moves to get this to be the #1 item.
Are you still arguing the point,
No, I'm
Mr.
observing.
Christopherson?
I wouldn't be arguing, Chair, because you ruled.
Yes, I know. Okay, so on the order. A different point of order, which is the right season for it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think it's obvious to anybody who actually was in the House last week, on June 12th, the Speaker of the House of Commons actually ruled on the advisability of the use of Standing Order 56.1. And, Mr. Chair, I'm sure you would have read it, because this is something that has a great deal of relevance to the work of the committee. But we asked them, following the appearance of the Leader of the Official Opposition, we said at the time that we had no objection to the Leader of the Official Opposition coming forward to committee, because we wanted to contrast the Leader of the Official Opposition's availability with the fact that Conservative ministers regularly will not come to committee. Defy committees, refuse to come to answer.
Can you get to your point of
areas. Order? I'm coming to that, Mr. Chair, but I do have, as you know, I do have some ability to provide a preamble to that point of order.
I'm getting to your limit, so go get to the point of order.
Well, Mr. Chair, I mean, if you want to give the impression of destruction of due process, that would be to shut down a member of the opposition on a point of order. So the Leader of the Official Opposition appeared. Subsequently, we asked the Speaker for a ruling. The ruling, I won't read the whole thing, but the question, the heart of the motion, as discussed by the Speaker, was at issue then is whether the motion in question was an admissible motion pursuant to Standing Order 56.1. And further, on page 6 of his lengthy ruling, he says the following. In conclusion, in fact, it leads the chair to the conclusion that the motion was stepped beyond what the House has come to accept as being within the confines of Standing Order 56.1. So I'll read that again. In fact, it leads the chair to the conclusion that the motion stepped beyond what the House has come to accept as being within the confines of Standing Order 56.1. So in terms of the admissibility, in terms of whether the original motion was in order or not, the Speaker was very clear. The motion was not in order. The motion was not admissible. Now, he said the Leader of the Official Opposition has already appeared. So, of course, that component is moot, and I think we would all agree with that. The reality is the Leader of the Official Opposition answered all questions, and the folks that I talk with are very clear. It's good to have a leader actually taking responsibility, coming forward and answering questions. But there's no doubt that the Speaker's ruling changes this committee's focus. The committee cannot continue with a study already raised by the Deputy Law Clerk and already raised by the former Law Clerk as being problematic, with the exception of the fact that the motion was brought forward in the House. I can reference that more specifically. Both the Deputy Law Clerk and the former Law Clerk said, this is really problematic. Now, there is a House order. So maybe there is a way of looking through this. Now we have a very clear direction from the Speaker that the motion was inadmissible. It was out of order. So, Mr. Chair, with all due respect, I think it's been very clear. The Speaker should not be defied on this. The Speaker should not be overruled by committee. The Speaker has ruled. The Speaker has said that it was inadmissible. It was out of order. It goes beyond the confines of what is permitted under Standing Order 56.1. So that is a clear acknowledgement that the idea that the government members have that we can just pursue this Standing Order 56.1 study forever, we can continue a kangaroo court forever, is something that has been I think very clearly pointed to by the Speaker as not being an appropriate venue. It's inadmissible. It was out of order. That means, of course, things will continue in other venues like the BOIE, which to our mind is partisan and secretive. But the reality is, in terms of the original House order, inadmissible.
Thank you, Mr. Julian. Mr. Lukiski, on that same point of order.
Yes, very much so, Mr. Speaker. I'd certainly like to respond to the point of order. And, of course, the overriding point that I will make in some detail is to contradict what Mr. Julian just said, because the Speaker absolutely did not say that it was inadmissible. And let me articulate that in greater detail. I want to answer his assertions first by looking at what the Speaker's ruling does and does not actually say. And second, I want to point to several subsequent events which squarely puts today's meeting and today's request excuse me, to have the Deputy Law Clerk brief the committee on last week's finding of the BOIE that the NDP inappropriately used House of Commons resources within this committee's ordinary purview and its permanent mandate. Firstly, despite what the member opposite said, the Speaker did not rule our March 27, 2014 order reference out of order. Now, I don't want to muddy the waters here, as my colleague opposite always tries to do. So I want to quote what the Speaker actually said, not what my colleague opposite would like to try and make others think what the Speaker said. What the Speaker actually said, and this will come from page 6719 of debates for June 12, 2014, and I quote, "Thus, for the reasons stated, I would have been inclined to rule the motion out of order had this matter been raised within a reasonable delay. Instead, in the absence of any objection at the time that the motion was moved, the matter went forward and the motion was adopted." End quote. At no point, Mr. Chair, in his ruling did the Speaker say the order reference was null and void. Likewise, the Speaker did not say that any proceedings undertaken pursuant to this order of reference were to be vacated. The Speaker simply said that had Mr. Julian jumped to his feet in the House that day, and not some 2 months later, he would have been inclined to rule in that fashion, but is not to say even with certainty that's how he would have ruled. Now, before moving on, I would also like to point out that our Speaker made reference to a similar ruling by a previous Speaker, Mr. Speaker Milliken, from September 18, 2001. Now, Mr. Chair, I think it's important to understand what that September 2001 ruling originated and when it originated. On June 12th of that year, 2001, a motion under Standing Order 56-1, the very motion that Mr. Julian is trying to say was out of order, had been adopted with respect to the disposition of legislation and the estimates over the course of that sitting and the next one. Now, a point of order had been raised later that day, the same day, and before the terms of the order made under Standing Order 56-1 had been carried out. But even though the point of order was raised the same day, but later in the day, Mr. Milliken, Speaker Milliken, dismissed the objections. At page 53 or 5031 of the debates on June 12, 2001, he stated, and again I quote, "Insofar as today's proceedings are concerned, the Chair is satisfied that the motion was adopted this morning without 25 members rising in their place and without objection at the time as to the procedural acceptability of the motion. The matter has come before the House at this late hour, and in my view, the motion has been adopted and will apply for tonight's proceedings, and we will leave it at that." End quote. So in effect, what Mr. Speaker Milliken was saying, that the objection raised to the 56-1 came hours afterwards, not immediately, and therefore would not be accepted. In this case, Mr. Julian waited almost 2 months after the 56-1 was passed, and he now expects that that procedural point of order of his should be approved and accepted? Clearly not. While the September 18th ruling, which was cited by Speaker Scheer last week, was rendered after all implicated proceedings had been carried out, it was a follow-up to the June 12th ruling that made after the Standing Order 56-1 was adopted and before the terms were carried out. So as I said, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, the Speaker ruled that you have to, if you want to make a point of order on the acceptability or unacceptability of 56-1, you have to do so immediately. Mr. Julian waited 2 months. We can't excuse his incompetence. We can only say that the Speaker ruled appropriately. Now, I would submit to you, Mr. Chair, that a parallel situation exists here, that a motion was proposed and adopted, but because it was challenged too late, it was not rescinded. And that's the key point. It was not rescinded. It was not vacated. Despite what the opposition is trying to say, that the motion was ruled out of order, it simply was not. Now, secondly, Mr. Chair, the basis for this study, this examination of how the NDP should be or could be compelled to repay the $1.7 million has been expanded. I say that, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chair, because on Wednesday of May 14th, as you would well know, this committee received a memo from the Clerk of the House of Commons conveying certain documents from the Board of Internal Economy. That covering memo included a request from the Board of Internal Economy for this committee to consider these issues and, pursuant to Standing Order 1083A1, to prepare a report in response. And let me read for the record the provision of the standing orders which I just referred to. Quote, "The mandate of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs shall include, in addition to the duties set forth in Standing Order 104, and among other matters, the review and report on, to the Speaker as well as the Board of Internal Economy, the administration of the House and the provision of services and facilities to members provided, that all members related thereto shall be deemed to have been permanently referred to the committee upon his membership having been established." End quote. So if you look back at that May 14th memorandum, you will see that the first documents following the covering memo relate to large volume mailings, the mailings in question, the mailings that were ruled inappropriate by the Board of Internal Economy, the mailings which the Board has determined the cost of which should be repaid by the NDP. Quite clearly, the $1.17 million in inappropriate mailings by the NDP fall within the scope of the mandate of this committee, and certainly falls within the scope of the materials which the Board has referred to this committee. At our meeting of June 3rd, we accepted the request of the Board of Internal Economy. The motion adopted that day reads in part, again I quote, "that the committee accept the request of the Board of Internal Economy of Wednesday, May 14th, 2014, to provide it and the Speaker with a report pursuant to Standing Order 1083A1, in addition to any report the committee may provide to the House in relation to this study." End quote. Of course, Mr. Chair, the motion also contained another clause of great relevance here, and my friends opposite seem to talk about the relevance of this study. So let's talk about that. The paragraph immediately preceding the one which I just quoted provides, and I quote again, "that in view of the evidence adduced to date, the committee expand its study if further evidence warrants to topics incidental to matters relating to the election of members to the House of Commons pursuant to Standing Order 1083A1, end quote. The pivotal words here are, if further evidence warrants. Now, I would suggest that we certainly have within our grasp that appropriate further evidence. This month, as everyone knows, the Board of Internal Economy, after several months of meetings, concluded that the large volume mailings undertaken by the official opposition formed an inappropriate use of House of Commons resources to the tune of almost $1.2 million. According to this June 2nd, 2014 minutes of the Board, as tabled in the House on June 13th of this year, and I quote, these are from the minutes, the Board agreed to the following. Number one, that the NDP mailings under recent investigation were in contravention of the Board's bylaws on the grounds that they were prepared by and for the benefit of a political party. Secondly, that the Board spokespersons be authorized to report to the public that the mailings have been found in contravention of the bylaws, end quote. And that is exactly what has occurred. On June 3rd, the Speaker issued a statement which appear on the parliamentary website, and let me quote its first paragraph. And I quote, "The Honourable Andrew Scheer, Speaker of the House of Commons and the Chair of the Board of Internal Economy, has confirmed that further to its statement of March 24, 2014, the Board has determined that certain mailings sent by New Democratic Party members, and this is the critical point here, were prepared by and for the benefit of the NDP as a political party and to advance electoral purposes, and therefore are in contravention of the bylaws, end quote. In other words, to be perfectly clear, the mailings were not your typical 10%ers or franked mail which promote individual members. They were promoting two things, the NDP party and the by-elections in question. They referred to the NDP website, all of which are in contravention of the Board of Internal Economy bylaws. Further, Mr. Chair, these were printed outside, for the most part, of the House of Commons. Therefore, the House was not aware of these mailings. Had they been made aware of such mailings, I'm sure that the Board, in their wisdom, would have ruled them to be out of order, and those mailings would not have been sent. But the NDP, knowing that was the probable outcome, had they consulted with and sought approval from the NDP, sought not to do so. As I said, Mr. Chair, this is further evidence that is now available to all of us, and of the variety contemplated by the motion we adopted on June the 3rd. But let me read again the relevant clause of that June 3rd committee order. Again, I quote, that in view of the evidence adduced to date, the committee expand its study, if further evidence warrants, to topics incidental to matters relating to the election of members to the House of Commons, pursuant to Standing Orders 1083A6, end quote. Now, Mr. Chair, the Board of Internal Economy has found as a fact that these mailings were to advance electoral purposes, since obviously they did not constitute a parliamentary purpose, and this committee has a permanent mandate, Understanding Order 1083A6, related to, quote, the review of and report on all matters relating to the election of members of the House of Commons, end quote. Therefore, these developments squarely put further study related to these inappropriate mailings within our normal jurisdiction to consider electoral matters. We need to have the Deputy Law Clerk brief us on exactly what the Board's decision is, what it means, what consequences flow from it, the potential remedies available to the Board and to the House, and how the Board can secure compliance from the rule breakers. Since we've accepted the Board's invitation to prepare a report and given the subsequent findings, we need to understand these developments so that we can determine how this committee could, or even whether we should, at this point in time, at least investigate various elements. Moreover, since the Board made the findings of fact that the mailings were of an electoral nature, we also need to wrap our heads around what that means with respect to electoral laws which are supposed to govern us all. In what ways did this $1.17 million give an inappropriate benefit to the NDP and its candidates? How would the impact on contribution limits and expense rules which apply to the NDP? How would that impact, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. Now, all of this begins with today's request for this meeting in order to be briefed by the Deputy Law Clerk, and that's why we call the 1064. All of this, as you have already ruled, Chair, is perfectly in order. Now, in concluding on this point of order, Mr. Chairman, let me summarize my points as follows. Firstly, the committee's order of reference of March 27, 2014 was not declared null and void, despite what the NDP might say, and there was definitely no ruling that any proceedings undertaking as consequences should be vacated. Secondly, the Board of Internal Economy referred additional materials to us on May 14, 2014, and requested that we prepare a report pursuant to our authority under Standing Order 1083A1. We accepted this request on June 3rd of this year. Thirdly, the committee agreed, this committee agreed, also on June 3rd, 2014, if further evidence warrants to expand this study into the realm of our permanent mandate related to electoral matters. The Board of Internal Economy has concluded that these large volume mailings were for the benefit of a political party and to advance electoral purposes, which is in contravention of the Board of Internal Economy bylaws. Therefore, this is without a doubt within our committee's purview to study. As such, Mr. Chairman, you should feel free to dismiss the NDP's point of order so that we can get on with the important meeting, so that we and the taxpayers can get briefed on the serious consequences of these findings and about the $1.1 million in inappropriate mailings, which of course were of benefit to the NDP, but in clear contravention of the Board of Internal Economy bylaws. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lukiski. Mr. Julian, a fairly short rebuttal, if you could.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Really?
I mean, if you're going to show bias,
Yeah,
that's showing bias.
pretend
You just had a
better than that.
filibuster for 20 minutes, and I'll start basically with a very, very clear fact, Mr. Chair. What I'm getting from Canadians is all these mailings that Conservatives are sending out with vicious attacks on the Leader of the Official Opposition, sometimes vicious attacks on the Leader of the Liberal Party, and Canadians are saying, I just got this in the mail. I can't believe that Conservatives, this secretive, Conservative-dominated Board of Internal Economy, is saying this vicious attack on the Leader of the Official Opposition is okay, but gosh, the NDP
Julian?
talking about environment policy is not.
Mr.
So,
Julian?
Quite frankly, the partisanship
Mr.
of the
Julian.
BOA, yes.
I know you recognize your name because you will occasionally turn when I use it. When I say, Mr. Julian, I'd like you to stop because you're way off. You're on your point of order about what the Speaker's ruling, and now you're off into some universe about mailings. Could you please talk about your point of order?
Mr. Chair, we've just had a 20-minute dialogue
I
from the
understand that, but we're not
Conservative
going to
Party
talk about the quality of mailings.
on the mailings. I'm sorry. We did not interrupt him. We allowed him to throw out his rant against the NDP. The reality is, we do have a system of checks and balances in this country. We do have due process. My point to start is very clear that people see the Conservatives doing these despicable partisan mailings even as we speak. And that's what Canadians are seeing, and that's why they're getting back to me and saying, I can't believe I received this today, Mr. Chair. I received this today, they'll say. Conservative voters, some of them voted Conservative, they'll say, I voted Conservative all my life, I just received this despicable mailing. And I can't believe that the Conservatives are this hypocritical. So, on the point of order, Mr. Chair, since you seem to believe that fairness is giving 20 minutes to the parliamentary secretary and a few minutes to the official opposition, let's go back first.
You're not done yet. We're going to get there, so.
I will start with the Speaker's ruling, because very conveniently, Mr. Lukiski, I didn't actually reference the ruling. He kind of said, well, this exact word that needed to be found about being null and void is the only thing that we would listen to. And then he cited Mr. Milligan's rulings from 13 years ago, which were cited by the government House Leader, of course, in the House of Commons, and he lost on that point. He raised Milligan's point that Mr. Lukiski has repeated, and the Speaker ruled against him. What the Speaker said, again, and I'm quoting now from the Speaker's ruling, unlike Mr. Lukiski, who was quoting from Mr. Milligan 13 years ago, which shows the relevance, I think. At issue then, and this is page 4 of the Speaker's ruling, and Mr. Lukiski can follow along. At issue then is whether the motion in question was an admissible motion pursuant to Standing Order 56.1. That is the question that the Speaker was asked, and the Speaker ruled with the conclusion. It leads the Chair to the conclusion that the motion stepped beyond what the House has come to accept as being within the confines of Standing Order 56.1. That's on page 6. So the Speaker asked the question, the heart of the question, and was absolutely right, is this admissible or not? And on page 6 he said, it is not admissible, it stepped beyond what the House has come to accept as being within the confines of Standing Order 56.1.
Point of order, Chair. Point of order, Chair.
Is very clear, front and center, Mr. Speaker.
Where did you say it's not
interrupting
admissible?
a point of order with another point of order? That's debate.
Where did you say it wasn't admissible? No, I just want to make sure he's quoting accurately.
Mr. Lukiski is
Thank you,
breathing, Mr. Chair.
Move on, Mr. Julian.
calm down. We get our turn, then you get to
Not
talk.
across the table, please, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand that under McCarthyism, it was the same kind of hearings with the government Republicans yelling and screaming at witnesses, and so I gather that's what Mr. Lukowski is trying to do. If he's lost it and he's screaming, that's because he's losing. So let's go to the issue that was raised both by the Deputy Law Clerk and raised by the former Law Clerk. The Deputy Law Clerk actually raised this in his memo, Mr. Chair, to all of us. The Deputy Law Clerk actually analyzed the original order and said that this is that the determination around the use of resources was exclusively given to the Board of Internal Economy. He did say that. Now, the fact that the Board of Internal Economy has now been deformed into a ugly, partisan, secretive body is something that is debate in another place. But here, very clearly, he said that the Board of Internal Economy was given that mandate under the Parliament of Canada Act. So we're talking about statutes. And then he said, further on, in warning the committee, he said, subject to the discussion below, one can conclude that the study before your committee does not fall within its mandate. So he said that very clearly, that this study does not fall within the committee mandate. He analyzed it. This is the Deputy Law Clerk stepping forward and saying, hold on, this doesn't it is not within your mandate. However, he said, and this is the one caveat or the one exception, this is on page 3, Mr. Lukowski can follow along, of the guidance provided to this committee. The matters before your committee following the adoption on March 27, 2014, a motion of instruction from the House of Commons. Now, that was a procedural dirty trick pulled by the Conservatives at the time. We allowed the Leader of the Official Opposition to come forward and speak because we knew Canadians would like to see him, and that worked very well. The next day, we appealed the decision, and that eliminated, given the Speaker's ruling that says that it was inadmissible, eliminates the only exception the Deputy Law Clerk found, that it is not within the mandate of the committee. However, because of that motion of instruction of the House of Commons, the committee could consider it. And then, of course, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chair, following that, the Deputy Law Clerk went over a whole range of cautions to this committee, many of which have not been observed and many of which we will love to ask him about, because he warned the committee exactly about conducting the kind of kangaroo court that we've seen at Procedure and House Affairs in a despicable way. So the Deputy Law Clerk actually cautioned. The only reason you can study this is because of that instruction. Now we have the Speaker saying, Mr. Chair, well, hold on now. That was inadmissible. And the question of the admissibility of that motion, that dirty trick, 56.1, it stepped beyond what the House has come to accept as being within the confines of Standing Order 56, and that is the conclusion of the Speaker of the House. Now, Mr. Chair, the issue of the former Law Clerk and the cautions that he provided are very germane to this discussion. And Mr. Chair, I don't doubt for a moment, given, though I like you, I understand you're in a framework, I like you personally, but you're in a framework where the PMO tells Conservative members what to do. So I have no doubt the eventual outcome of this point of order. I see this majority every day in so many ways, just trying to crush and attack opposition, whether it's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Parliamentary Budgetary Officer, Chief Electoral Officer, Leader of the Official Opposition. It's all the same. But I think it's important to note, because Canadians believe in fair process, and I'm speaking through you to those Canadians who believe in fair process, the former Law Clerk said to allow the use of House proceedings for any purpose whatsoever would be to license parliamentary tyranny by a governing majority over the minority parties sitting in opposition, if not also over outside third parties. He also warned the former Law Clerk that the committee is at risk of creating double jeopardy by pursuing matters that are traditionally the exclusive purview of the Board of Internal Economy. So, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chair, here we've got the Speaker's ruling that very clearly falls within the purview of what the Deputy Law Clerk instructed us in terms of this is not a mandate of the committee. However, You've got the House mandate. The Speaker then said, well, hold on, it's inadmissible. That motion was inadmissible, and very clearly said it stepped beyond the bounds of what is considered appropriate. And then you've got the former law clerk saying to allow the use of House proceedings for any purpose whatsoever would be to license parliamentary tyranny by a governing majority. This is exactly what is happening here, Mr. Chair. What we've seen over the last few months, this is an unprecedented attack on an opposition party. We have had no opposition to having the Conservative mailings, the Liberal mailings, and the New Democratic mailings evaluated independently. What we've seen instead at the BOIE is the House administration has been prohibited from analyzing the despicable, partisan, personal attacks in the Conservative mailings that are going out every day, and the Liberal mailings that follow the same guidelines as the NDP mailings. We don't object to having the mailings analyzed. Of course we don't. What we do object to is this parliamentary tyranny that the former law clerk warned us about. A licensing of parliamentary tyranny by a governing majority over the minority parties. And we see this now in the turning of the BOIE that always functioned on a consensus model into an ugly, secretive, partisan body now that targets whoever they want. We see this in ministers now trying to say that Crown corporations can be part of any witch hunt. And we're now seeing this when the deputy law clerk, the former law clerk, and the Speaker have all cautioned this committee. Mr. Lukiski said, no, just go right ahead. Let's bring a lynch mob out and attack the opposition. And that is completely inappropriate, Mr. Chair. This is an inappropriate process. This is a process that very clearly was inadmissible from the start, is clearly inadmissible now, and what we see is a government with its parliamentary tyranny, as the former law clerk very clearly cautioned all Canadians prior to this hearing starting. We're seeing a parliamentary tyranny of the majority imposing itself, and Mr. Speaker, I don't think Canadians sided with the Prime Minister when he attacked the Chief Justice. I don't think the Canadians sided with the Prime Minister when he attacked the Parliamentary Budget Officer or the Chief Electoral Officer or Sheila Fraser, and I don't think Canadians side with the Prime Minister in attacking the official opposition. What Canadians would expect is, as we have, and I know a motion is going to be coming forward this week from the NDP saying that the Auditor General should come in and look at all mailings and look at parliamentary resources. We've been trying that, as you know, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, we tried that last fall. We said the Auditor General should be brought in, independent, and he will evaluate everybody appropriately. And he will look at the overall use of parliamentary funds, including some of the things that the BOIE has been doing. And then Canadians can have trust in that result. And it was refused by Conservatives and Liberals last fall. It was refused again in the spring when we brought it forward to the House of Commons. But that's what Canadians want. There is no doubt, Mr. Chair. Canadians believe the Auditor General should be independent in evaluating things. It shouldn't be a partisan, secret, ugly, backroom Conservative committee making these types of decisions and attacking, in the same way they attack the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, a parliamentary opposition. So, Mr. Chair, in conclusion, we have, even though Mr. Lukiski tried to avoid actually reading the words of the Speaker, we have a Speaker that said, in response to the question of at issue then is whether the motion in question was an admissible motion pursuant to Standing Order 56.1. He asked the question and he gave the answer. It leads the Chair to the conclusion that the motion stepped beyond what the House has come to accept as being within the confines of Standing Order 56.1. Inadmissible. The parliamentary secretary can say, well, no, I wanted this particular word, and if I don't have this particular word, then Conservatives can do whatever the hell they want. That's not the way it works in a real democracy, Mr. Chair. Perhaps in some banana republics, potentially, yeah. But in Canada, Canadians actually believe in due process. They believe in having that essential fairness, that whether you go in a court or a jury, that you're evaluated in the same way everybody else is evaluated. You're not evaluated differently because you're a New Democrat and you're the strongest official opposition the Prime Minister has ever seen, differently than how a Conservative mailing would be evaluated. You don't have a secretive conservative body saying, no, you can attack the leader of the official opposition in an intensely personal way, in a partisan and personal way, and that's okay because we've decided it's okay because we set the rules because we're conservatives and we can do whatever we want. That is not how Canada functions. That is what the former law clerk cautioned us against when he said, to allow the House proceedings for any purpose whatsoever would be to license parliamentary tyranny by a governing majority. So we have the Speaker's ruling, we have the Deputy Law Clerk very clearly saying this is not within the mandate of Procedure in House Affairs. However, with that instruction, well, perhaps it could be allowed, except that the instruction was inadmissible. And we have the warnings, the very prescient warnings from the former law clerk saying the kinds of things that we're seeing now, the use of House proceedings for any purpose whatsoever, licensed parliamentary tyranny by a governing majority over the minority. And I think, Mr. Chair, though I have no hope that this will get fair hearing, we are not talking about the kind of rules of evidence that work in a court of law, and the courts will eventually, as they have rejected so many conservative bills, they'll eventually reject these kangaroo courts proceedings, I think, as well. I have no hope in this particular venue with a conservative majority, even if you were sympathetic, even if you said, yes, that's true, all the points the NDP have raised are true, even if you said, as chair, I will rule that this continued witch hunt is inadmissible, the Conservative majority would overrule you. And I've seen the few times the Conservative chairs have had to tried to stand up for justice and rule of law and due process. I've seen Conservative majorities just steamroll them out. So I have sympathy for your position. I like you as a person, but I know that the Conservatives will force you, if you don't do it yourself, to rule against, defy the Speaker's ruling and the clear warnings and concerns raised by both the Deputy Law Clerk and the former Law Clerk. And I find that appalling, Mr. Chair, and I think the vast majority of Canadians would say we need a return to due process in this country. We actually need in this country a system of checks and balances so that that parliamentary tyranny by a governing majority that the former Law Clerk has warned us about does not come to pass in every facet of Canadian life.
Thank you. Mr. Lukiszki. A short rebuttal, please.
Extremely briefly. Again, I would point out to my colleagues opposite and to anyone else who may be watching that at no point in the Speaker's ruling did he say the order reference was null and void. At no point did he say that the proceedings undertaken as a result of the order reference were to be vacated. Had he wished to do so, he could have done so. The Speaker could have said all of this should not be considered. He did not say so. Why? Because it was in order, Mr. Speaker. Now, finally, I would just point out, member opposite keeps referring to the Deputy Law Clerk. Let him appear. That's all we said. Let him appear. If you think that he's going to support your position, let him appear.
What are you afraid of?
What are you afraid of? He and many other officials on the House administration side, not the elected politicians, but the House administration officials who examined this, determined that the mailings were inappropriate. So let's bring some of those people here and find out what we can do about it. If he wishes to question the assistant or the deputy law clerk, if he thinks that the deputy law clerk will support his political position, he has an opportunity to do so. Let's get on with it. Let's schedule a time and see when we can bring M. Denis to the committee.
Thank you. I have no other speakers, so I will rule that the 106-4 motion that brought us here today is in order. It's admissible, certainly because the committee did receive a specific order of reference from the House in order to start this process. The substance of the request pertains to the matter before us in the order of reference from the House. And since that study has started at this committee, we've also received a request, as was mentioned, from the Board of Internal Economy in order to look further and supply them with a report at the end of our study. And most important, I think, is that it was the intent of the Speaker to revoke this order of reference. He would have specifically done it in his ruling in the House. So therefore, we are here today in order to decide whether we will invite the law clerk and at what time we will be seeing him. Yes?
If I might just exercise my right to serve a notice of motion, I believe it's been circulated, so I'll just read it and then relinquish the floor back to you, Chair. That the committee requests that the Auditor General of Canada conduct an audit into the mailing programs of all members of Parliament from March 31st, 2010 forward, including the mailing programs of House officers and ministers, to determine whether any bylaws were violated in the production or sending of addressed or unaddressed mail by members, and report back to the committee no later than Monday, December 15th, 2014. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So that's a notice of motion, and that's now with us. We are now on the topic of today's meeting. Yes?
To that point, I don't know if you're assembling a speaker's list.
To that point. Okay,
yeah, to that point. All I was going to suggest, Chair, is that if the committee agrees to instruct you and the clerks to try and determine when Monsieur Denis might be available and schedule a meeting forthwith based on his schedule.
Mr. Julian, on that point?
Well, our next scheduled meeting is Thursday, Mr. Chair. But I have some other comments I'd like to make. As far as having them on Thursday, I am absolutely in favor of that. In fact, for the 48 hours notice, it would have to be Thursday. For a committee meeting.
Yeah, just on that, I just want to find, this is a 106.4, right. So, which we have called, now, that's why we're here today. Subsequent to that, are we then, under the ambit of 106.4, able to have a meeting, let's say, for an example, Monsieur Denis said he is available tomorrow. Would we be able to schedule a meeting tomorrow?
My understanding that yes is the answer to that.
Then again, I go back to what my first suggestion was. We find what his schedule is and try and schedule a meeting at the earliest opportunity that is consistent with and agrees with Monsieur Denis' personal schedule. If it is tomorrow, let it be tomorrow.
Does it have to be 24 hours?
No.
We'll give the notice to the committee right here. But anyway, carry on, Mr. Julian.
But it's 48 hours.
He's
the law clerk is available on Thursday morning. We will be sitting on Thursday. I think if Mr. Lukiski was thinking somehow that things are going to be wrapped up early, Thursday is our next scheduled meeting.
Were you not listening, Peter? You don't listen to my question.
The next scheduled meeting is Thursday. The chair would be putting that into place for Thursday. Now, as far as the Thursday meeting is concerned,
I thought you would just rule that under the ambit of 106.4, it doesn't have to be Thursday. If we can have it tomorrow if we wish, just like some clarification.
Mr. Chair, this was the 106.4 meeting. That no longer applies. You can't schedule two meetings with the same. I mean, you've got to be crazy, Mr. Chair. No, well, okay. Now, if the 106.4 meeting was now, we just clarified that at the beginning of the meeting. There is a 48-hour notice period required if the Conservatives want to request another 106.4. But you do not get two meetings out of one 106.4. So I think that's not even something the chair has to rule on. That's just very clearly what are in the standing orders in terms of committees. That you can't schedule. If we send in, the official opposition sends in a 106.4, you can't say, okay, the NDP's now scheduled 3 meetings, 5 members. We've had the meeting. In fact, the chair was very clear about that in response to the questions from Mr. Christofferson. We've had the 106.4 meeting. That is now. That's done. If you want to send in, the Conservatives want to send in another notice, they could, but the 48 hours would apply, which means we're talking about Thursday. So we're talking about a meeting on Thursday at 11 o'clock. If we're talking about due process, unless we have now entered a circus zone where Conservatives just make up their own standing orders as they go along, defy the Speaker's ruling, defy everything, that would be a different kettle of fish. Now, since we're talking about a Thursday meeting, we certainly agree. But this is my question to you, Mr. Chair, and I'm very concerned about that, because since we're seeing such a complete destruction of due process by this government, we want to be able to question the Deputy Law Clerk on a whole range of issues that came up in relation to this study. Of course, the Speaker's ruling, of course, the concerns and the cautions offered by the Deputy Law Clerk in terms of the study itself, and the Deputy Law Clerk's concerns about the leaks that members of this committee were doing on a systematic basis. I mean, we've raised concerns about that at this committee, Mr. Chair, and of course, nothing's been done about it yet. We keep pressing the issue. We keep saying that the idea that somehow committees can just leak everything, Conservatives have opposed in the past, but certainly, personally, there's no doubt that the issue of leaks is an important one. So I want to ask you, Mr. Chair, I am assuming that we will be able to ask the Deputy Law Clerk those questions. However, we have seen systematically in other committees, Conservative chairs ruling out of order any question that was not permitted by the Conservatives. I want to make sure that that is not going to happen in this case, and I think Mr. Christopherson probably has some things to add to that.
Sure, right after Mr. Richards, Mr. Lukiski. Mr. Richards?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I find it interesting to listen to Mr. Julian speak on behalf of the NDP and indicate they're wanting to avoid a meeting. I mean, it's interesting to me when he's spent, you know, a number of minutes just at the beginning of this meeting talking about how he felt this committee was so far behind and we should be working on things. Well, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to have a meeting as soon as possible to hear from the Deputy Law Clerk. And yet, you know, despite that, he sits here now and he's trying to avoid having a meeting as soon as possible. It's sort of, you know, is reminiscent of some of his antics in the media that he's been displaying in the recent days where, you know, he's flailing about trying to do everything he can to avoid accountability for their misuse of the money. And that seems to be what's happening here again today. It's unfortunate. I think we should get to a meeting as soon as we possibly can and hear from the Deputy Law Clerk. I think it would be very helpful for us to hear from him.
Mr. Lukiski, on this motion?
Yeah, despite Mr. Julian trying to infer that you don't know how to do your job and only he can give a proper ruling and understanding of the standing orders,
Well,
I'd just like to get...
that.
Yeah, I notice your admirable restraint, Mr. Chair, from the invective and the insults hurled at you from the opposition, but I would just like to ask the clerk, if he doesn't believe me, which I don't expect he ever will, let's just ask the clerk whether this committee has the ability and the right to call a meeting when it wishes. And therefore, if Monsieur Denis is available tomorrow, whether this committee has the ability to call a meeting for tomorrow.
I'll make that on behalf of the clerk. Of
Certainly.
course, the chair has the ability to call meetings at any time as long as notice goes.
So then Mr. Julian once again was wrong, and I go back to my initial point. Let's find out when Monsieur Denis is available, and I would suggest we call a meeting at the first opportunity pursuant to his availability. Wrong again, Peter. Eventually you'll get it right, though. Don't worry.
I don't know.
Oh, well, maybe not. I spoke too soon.
Mr. Julian, you put Mr. Christopherson's name on my speaker's list. I don't know whether he said he wants on. Is it?
If Mr. Julian would like the floor back, I'll
Give it to him. Okay. Mr. Julian?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I can only say, just we're talking about a very unprecedented and a completely different approach than I've ever seen in the 10 years I've been here. And Mr. Lukiski can certainly throw any insult he wants. That's fine. I like him, and I think he's often right, but often wrong. But the personal attacks that we see from Conservatives don't change the fact that this is a complete shift away from due process that we're aware of. We had a committee meeting set up for last week. It was canceled. We have a committee meeting today that was replaced by the 106.4. What I hear the Conservatives saying is we're going to just demand a meeting anytime we want, which is even though we have a scheduled meeting for Thursday, which is a two-hour period that is there, which gets me back, since at every single point we've seen the Conservatives simply say, hey, we're going to throw the rules out, the rulings out the window. We're going to proceed because we have that parliamentary majority that the former law clerk warned us about. The question that I ask you again is the opposition, is official opposition going to be allowed to ask our questions? Because systematically in Conservative committees, Conservative chairs rule opposition questions out of order. We have seen this systematically right across our committees. We have seen chairs say, no, the study is only on the benefits of this Conservative policy. You can't ask a question about any of the problems or consequences that come out of that Conservative policy. We've seen this systematically. It's a huge abuse of the parliamentary process. It basically eliminates the kind of democratic debate. But I ask you again, Mr. Chair, because I'd like you to be on the record. Are you going to rule opposition members' questions out of order, or are you going to allow us to ask the questions around the Speaker's ruling, around the issues that we've seen, of course, with the BOIE and its partisan nature, the issue around the warnings that the Deputy Law Clerk provided to us, around this study itself, saying only that the motion of instruction was the only thing that validated it, and the motion of instruction has been ruled inadmissible. We saw that in the Speaker's ruling, despite what Mr. Lukisky says, that is the ruling. Despite what Mr. Lukisky says, the Conservatives lost that ruling. The government House Leader was not happy when the ruling came down, but we got the ruling, and the reality is that's a ruling that members should be heeding. And then, of course, the other issue, which is the systematic and planned ongoing leaks of partial leaks, not of everything. The documents that, of course, were reinforced our position, sometimes were withheld, but systematic and partial leaks that took place regularly, following the warnings from the Deputy Law Clerk that these leaks should not be taking place and that the committee should be put in place every single measure to ensure that those leaks did not take place. So those are the kinds of questions that I certainly will be wanting to ask. My colleagues probably have other questions they want to ask the Deputy Law Clerk. But will those questions be allowed? That's my question to you, Mr. Chair.
As with any study in this committee, and I certainly believe fairness has been shown, if it's in the scope of the motion before us.
I just relinquished my spot in order, not my spot entirely.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was asked a
That's
question.
okay, no.
I was going to answer it even though Mr. Julian is,
Sorry.
Just loves me today. I'll go back to you, Mr. Christopherson. Go ahead.
Thanks, sir. I won't be that long. I just want to tackle this issue of somehow that we're running away from this meeting. Far from it. First of all, we can't run away from anything because the government's got a majority. So we accept that whatever tyranny they've decided they want to do, we're going to be whipsawed into that. That's the nature of the beast, and the public will see it and render their judgment on that. But as I understand it, what we're asking the Deputy Law Clerk to come in and do is talk about what are the mechanisms by which the government, in this case the Conservatives, can force the NDP to pay back money that we don't believe that we owe. And here's the situation. The trial as to whether or not we were guilty took place in private, in camera, where a majority, 2 out of 3 parties, ruled against the one party in a system that's supposed to be consensus built, which is why it's okay to be in camera. But the trial and jury took place in camera, but now the sentencing is going to be done in public. So we're still arguing with, we believe, great merit, the fundamental findings of BOIE, the lack of any kind of natural justice, the lack of any public knowing what's going on. The government keeps repeating, you're guilty, you owe this. That's a star chamber. That's a star chamber. Nobody's put any evidence out in public. All we've ever asked through the whole process was put this out in the public. We're quite prepared to live by the rules, as the other parties are too. But let's see how the rules are being applied to the NDP and make sure they're being applied equally to everybody. And if that's the case, we'll live with the consequences. It's this business of having a trial and jury in camera in a star chamber setting, and then make a big deal about doing the sentencing aspect in public, as if somehow that makes what was done earlier okay. So we're not afraid of having this meeting. It's just going to be to talk about money that we don't believe we're owed anyway. We believe that it was a politically mandated, it was politically driven by the Conservatives and their handmaidens, the Liberals, in a meeting that conveniently is in camera, a secret meeting where two of the parties found one of the other parties guilty in a system that's supposed to be consensus to start with. So there are all kinds of problems with this, starting from the beginning to the process, including the findings. So if you want to bring in the Deputy Law Clerk to talk about what procedures is available to the government to continue their political execution of the official opposition, fine. Why would we run from that? Because we don't believe that we owe that money. We don't believe that we've broken the rules, and all we're asking for is our day in court, but we want that court to be in public. That's what we're seeking here. And the fact that this meeting, in our opinion, has been manipulated, that the process of 106 has been manipulated, is all just part of it. So we're not resisting because we're worried about what will happen at this meeting. Fine, let's have a discussion about how that money's gotten back. When it turns out that the Liberals and Conservatives are guilty of technically violating all the rules too, we need to know what the mechanisms are to go after them, if that's the interest of the committee. But in terms of us trying to avoid that, that's not the issue. What we are trying to do is preserve what little rights we still have left around here. So make no mistake, Deputy Law Clerk is going to come in. You want to hold the meeting tomorrow? Fine, hold the meeting tomorrow. We'll be there. But we've got questions of the Deputy Law Clerk that are consistent with some of the rulings that the Speaker made in terms of the guidance that this committee was given, and it's way over those lines of guidance. So by all means, let's have this meeting and let's start talking about what's really going on here, and let's really drill down and talk about the difference between proper procedures and being fair-minded versus the kind of kangaroo court process that we've seen. So by all means, let's have the meeting, Chair, as long as we have the free rein to ask questions that are relevant to the scope of the mandate of this committee, in addition to the government's questions. And with that understanding, we are quite fine having this meeting. It's just a shame that the government's manipulation of the politics around here extends all the way to fiddling with agendas and fiddling with meetings that are canceled and calling witnesses, and it's all just very, very ugly, very messy, very un-Canadian in terms of the way it's being done. So be it. So be it. We'll see you tomorrow.
Mr. Julian, to finish.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly agree with Mr. Christopherson. I was trying to figure out this idea that we've got a regularly scheduled meeting on Thursday. We're going to be sitting on Thursday. Why the government would be pressing ahead with, hey, let's do this quickly. And I suddenly realized, Mr. Chair, it's because of Northern Gateway. The Conservatives know that they're going to lose 20 seats if they go the way that we're expecting them to go after question period today. Absolutely. Absolutely. It has all relevance in the world. Mr. Chair, if you could ask them to stop hurling insults, that would be wonderful. So we've got Northern Gateway coming this afternoon. The government has waited till the last possible minute to try to actually push ahead, steamroll British Columbians with this. We know that 70% of the population in British Columbia is opposed to Northern Gateway, and we know that it puts 20 seats in play for the NDP, because the NDP has been standing up for British Columbians and Conservatives have not been. So why this sudden Are we
We're
on?
talking about a motion to invite the law clerk to this committee.
Yes.
And you've gone to pipelines.
And we've said that Thursday is our regularly scheduled meeting. We've said we're open to that issue. I've raised a number of concerns about questions that might be allowed or disallowed that I would like to hear you specifically come back on, Mr. Chair. But at the same time, the reason why this is being pushed for tomorrow is because of the Conservatives' incredible concern about the reaction of British Columbians of ramming through the pipeline. I think this probably sends the clearest message yet, Mr. Chair, that the decision tonight will be against British Columbians, because that's why the Conservatives are scrambling to throw in something, anything to distract from what is going to be a pretty substantive reaction. Now, so it's good to know now what the game plan is. The game plan is to try to detract from an issue that is going to cost the Conservatives 20 seats in British Columbia in the next election. So, Mr. Chair, coming back to the issue of questions being allowed, the BOIE and its move to a partisan process, the Speaker's ruling rendering the 56.1, the dirty trick that started this process in Procedure and House Affairs, being rendered inadmissible, the leaks that the Deputy Law Clerk very clearly warned us against and asked the committee to take appropriate precautions for, and his cautions about the study itself, cautions about this not fitting in the mandate of the committee. Those are 4 areas that we want to be asking questions on. Do we have your assurance that we will be able to ask questions in those areas?
Thank you for that point. On the motion of inviting the law clerk at the earliest convenience, those in favor of the motion? And Mr. Lamro? Those opposed? Then we will invite the law clerk at his earliest convenience. Mr. Julian, in at least partial answer to your question, I will be the fair chair that I am each and every day. And if your questions are within the scope and the law clerk is able to answer them, then they will certainly be allowed. Let's we have a report finished. Mr. Christopherson, are you on something else?
You were going to do next, Chair. Sounds like you're...
We have a report finished on the it's a draft report, so I'd like it not discussed, but I'd like the ability to distribute it to you. The report that the analysts have put together on the Bazant's motion of privilege. May I distribute it to the committee?
Yeah.
Or have it cause that to happen?
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody's all right with that? We'll make sure that happens.
Wasn't it supposed to be?
Yeah, by email as well, or just by the hard copy, or Mr. Lukiski?
Sorry, just a
We'd
question,
like your
Chair.
input back. So,
You know, just a question. I mean, so we're not going to be discussing it now. We're not going to be examining it now.
I have to ask permission to distribute a draft report.
We're fine with that.
All right, great. We'll get it out. Anything else for our committee today?
Housekeeping matter of committee business. The Bazan report, we had said we were going to try to clean that up before we rose for the summer. What's your sense of
this is my intent, that you get it now, today. You have the ability to digest it somewhat, and if we get a chance to discuss it, then we can clear it up.
Okay, and what about the leaks report?
All would work if we have the time.
Which is what we were supposed to be doing today. No, okay, thanks.
Well, I'm following procedures at the Procedure and House Affairs Committee.
Go
Mr.
along.
Christopherson. Mr. Julian?
Just a final point, Mr. Chair. Of course,
I can't believe there's more, but go ahead.
Well, Mr. Christopherson's motion, of course, will be in order tomorrow.
Well, of course.
Yeah,
No,
because the 48
his
hours.
motion will have reached its maturity. It won't.
Well,
the
no, the
in-order
48
part
hours
be
will have
something
expired.
we'll
It didn't expire
deal
for
with.
today, but it will have expired for tomorrow, the 48 hours.
He has a couple of others already still, too, that are at maturity. So whenever he deems to have them discussed, they could obviously happen. Anything else for the good of committee today? Well, then I thank you all. We'll work on scheduling the Deputy Law Clerk at his earliest convenience.